Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever or whenever you may be. This is a special edition of the overnight. And for the second week in a row, I forgot to hit the live button. So we had a few minutes of practice. But this week, we've got the Rogue Banshee on with us to talk about 3D printers. He does 3D printing, has streamed some of his printing stuff. And he's been in FFL and has a gun channel, lots of gun content. There's a link to his channel in the description, so make sure at some point to check him out, give him a sub, give him some love. So for those who may not know your channel or you, I want you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My channel is the Rogue Banshee. Originally started out when I was an FFL, and I was doing serial coding, and people were bringing me their guns, and quite frankly, taking people's guns apart and putting them back together after I do coding was kind of, well, I just didn't like doing it. So I actually started doing videos on how to disassemble and reassemble guns, and the channel just kind of morphed from there. I do videos on firearm accessories and still do some disassembly, reassembly, and occasionally I turn a camera on when my 3D printer's going, just so people can just see the monotony of the head going back and forth and laying down plastic.
G23 likes your patch, he said.
Oh, cool. Did I send you one, Voss?
No.
Yeah, send me your address. I'll get you a patch out.
Okay, I'll send you some stickers. I don't have a patch. I'm not big enough yet.
You're not big enough? Yeah, you'll get there, man. You're working through it. I mean, it took me a while. I was sitting in that spot before, and I was like, man, I'll never get there. And it eventually just happens. So you'll get there. I have faith that you'll get there.
It's kind of amazing. I'm YouTube, in the YouTube verse, I'm nobody, but I didn't think anybody would ever want to watch anything I put out, but I decided just to put it out anyways. And
and that's what that's what we always talked about, because you've been out on Clover Tax Thursday night podcast, and we've always said just go out and turn your camera on, just start filming.
Yeah,
that's how you start.
But I enjoy it, so I'm trying to do it in a way where I'll keep enjoying it and not burn myself out. I don't put out as much content, or I'm fine with that.
I hit burnout once doing it, and I was getting stressed out. Work was busy, and then I'm always worried about content, and then I kind of worked through it. I slowed down for a little bit, and then I just created a schedule. I'm like, I'm going to do this on this day, this on that day, and then that's how I work through my burnout. But it's not hard. It's not hard to burn out.
Yeah, you can end up with a lot of pressure on you to produce and stuff like that, and so I figured if I'll just stay at my pace, and it's, for me, the content is more important. So if somebody sees, like a gun review, hopefully it's helpful to them, and maybe I might look at something a little bit differently than other people, help somebody think something through.
And that's kind of important right there. Just what you said is, if, let's just say you're going to make a gun buying decision, right? And you watch a YouTube video and somebody says, hey, this is the greatest thing in the world. Is it really? I mean, to them, it might be. So definitely go and watch a couple of other content creators, because you get a different point of view. You're going to get a different point of view from me than from you on the same firearm. So that's what's kind of important about having multiple content creators out there is to get that extra point of view, and you may think about something that I totally didn't even think of. Even in my videos, there's some videos that I've done that the comment section is just really alive because they thought of something that I didn't even think of, or they said, "Hey, there's a better way of doing it," and it's really great to see interaction like that. Multiple points of view is not a bad thing.
Yep, and that's on when I'm on G23 show. That's usually what I'll say when we end is to try and get people to get out there and make videos. Just the more people doing it, I think the better. Building the community, and somebody that you can reach out to might be somebody that I wouldn't connect with. They wouldn't get anything from me, but they might get it from you. If that makes sense.
No, it does. It totally does. And what's so funny is, when I originally started thinking about doing content creating, and it was always like, I always thought other content creators were, they were competition. And it doesn't need to be like that. I ran into some other content creators and got to know them, and it's a community. So don't think of things as competition. Just go out, put some content on. I mean, to be honest with you, I learned something from your channel just a while ago. I had no idea that Smith & Wesson did a survival kit. Had no idea, and I was an FFL.
Really?
I had no idea that even existed. So, I mean, you can learn things from so many different people. There's no one place to get your information from.
So, we've got G23s out there, MKJO, Ruguru's channel, Defense Dad just slipped in. And Nightshaft was here probably a couple days ago and left a message. But I'm trying to get better at acknowledging the people in the chat, because sometimes I'll get talking and then I'm not ignoring the chat, but I've only got like one cylinder, so it can only do one thing at a time.
Well, it's so funny because if you think about it, hosting's got to be one of the hardest things, because you're trying to lead the discussion. You're trying to keep in track of what's going on the chat and acknowledge people. I mean, you got a lot of things going on your monitor that I don't think people really understand that.
That's the whole reason I did a chat to begin with, was to learn more about doing a chat. Just, because I've watched them, I've sat in other people's chats. So I wanted to see what it was like on the other side, to run it, have people out there engaging with you, just so I could learn the process. I learn by doing. Then once I do it, then I can learn by reading. But sometimes it's hard for me, to read a set of instructions if I've never done it before.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. And, my day job, I do cybersecurity for my day job, and I've been doing IT work for almost 24 years now. And I'm very much a learn by doing. When I went through my certifications, you had to read about it and all that stuff, but man, get me behind a keyboard and I will figure it out. That's definitely the way I like to learn. So I get it.
So let's talk about 3D printers. I know I have a rudimentary understanding of them. I have a basic understanding of how they work, but I've never seen one in person. Never touched one. I've seen your live streams where you've basically turned on your camera and then let it go, and then you'll then you'll take that and speed it up to make a shorter video of it. But so we'll see if we can help people understand how they work, and then kind of quell some of the misunderstandings of, you can't just turn it on and poop out a gun.
Yeah, no, you can't. And there's a lot of things you can do with a 3D printer. So I reached over and grabbed this. This is something I 3D printed. I live streamed this. Got a community strike for the live stream like several months later, because the title was 3D printing Glock bench block. They saw 3D printing Glock and jammed it up. So this is a bench block that someone designed, put out there, and I printed so that way it helps you with disassembling a Glock. And I've used this in a couple of videos. So you don't have to be, a design person. You can Google things and find designs that people have already done. It's really great because most of the stuff is open sourced, where you can take it and you can modify it to what you need if you have those skills to do, or you can print it out and you don't have to, pay a royalty to it. So this was one, even he remixed this one from somebody else's, and that's what they call it when you change it. It's called a remix. So he added a bunch of other features to another one someone else did, and he came out with his own. So you don't have to be a design expert. You don't have to sit there and go, hey, I want to design this a bench block. It's probably already there. Google for it. To give you an idea, we had this little glass table that has these little clips in it, and the clips disappeared, being in storage. And we're like, man, we're gonna have to get rid of this thing because we can't find these clips. And I did some Googling, and within 5 minutes, someone actually had the same problem I did and designed the exact clip. And I downloaded it in seven hours later. I had all the clips for this table. So 3D printing is a slow process. You're not going to go fast with it. We talk about with the redefinition of firearms, people are so afraid, people will say certain politicians are so afraid that people are just going to just start printing guns out and they go out and shoot them. It doesn't work like that. A Glock frame, if you were to 3D print a Glock frame, you're looking at about 24 to 26 hours of just printing time alone.
Wow. So
it's not a fast process. And then even then, you can't just grab that off and put, off your printer and then put your parts into it and then go shoot it. Sometimes you got to clean it up a little bit. You got to, there's these things called supports, because you can't print in thin air. So you have to print a part that you can print another part onto to remove that support. And then you still got to put metal into it. You just can't print this gun and then shoot it. You do need to buy rails to go into it, so that way you can put the slide onto it, because you can't have a metal slide being held on by a piece of plastic. This stuff is not that strong. So yeah, it's a slow process. But once you get into it, it's kind of fun. Because I ran into, I was working with this is a Mantis X10, and I wanted to work on it with a SIG P365. Well, SIG has this weird proprietary rail system on that 365, and I found a model online, and I 3D printed a pick rail for that, and then now I can mount this Mantis X10 onto my 365 to do my dry fire training. But yeah, I've only designed two things. I've designed something else. but most of the time it's somebody else's design that I'm printing. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid that you've got to go through and design something and you got to know CAD. A lot of times you can just download the model. You'll do what we call slicing, which actually just makes that model ready for printing, and then let it go on the printer.
So let's how does it make things?
So the way it works.
Can you
leave.
Can you point your camera at it? Or
Yeah,
is that
I
gonna
can.
mess you up?
Nope. Let's. I purposely put a USB extension onto this camera because I figured you were going to ask about that. So hopefully I'm not making everybody sick. There is my 3D printer right there. I built this wooden hood over it just mostly for sound. But you'll see up here, this is your filament. So this is just plastic. It's on a roll. And it'll go down into the printer right here. And here's the printer head. And I realize it's kind of dark down there, but so that printer head goes back and forth while this bed is moving back and forth. So it'll go this way, up, down, and back and forth in order to print that print. So that's kind of how 3D printing works. In actuality, it's really called 2.5D. We call it 3D because when it makes a curve, I'm looking around to see if there's anything I have that has a curve. To be true 3D, this printer is trying to keep that head on a plane and it's moving up and down like this. Well, when you have a curve, I do wish I had something I show. It actually prints short. So it just doesn't go out as far. So each layer just gets shorter in order to make an arc. Well, in a true 3D printer, the head would actually print like this as a complete arc. So that's why 3D prints are sometimes a little rough because they're not truly 3D. They're just putting a layer down and then another flat layer down and another flat layer down. So it doesn't give you a really good curve sometimes.
So with your the medium, the plastic, one thing I was curious about is how is it deposited? Is it just liquefied and kind of oozes out? Does it spurt it out?
So inside you have the filament comes down. It'll go through what's called an extruder, and all that is a motor with gears that pushes that filament. And on mine, it'll go through a tube down to the head. The head is what is heated. So that's where the melting happens. And then it comes out a fine nozzle. And then that nozzle is what actually deposits the plastic where it's being printed.
So kind of like a glue gun.
Pretty much. It's like one really sophisticated glue gun, but it's if you look at the nozzles, it almost looks like a glue gun nozzle. But that's probably the best analogy I've ever heard of a 3D printer.
So the plastic, is it just one color? Can you do multiple colors? Do you have to switch to do a different color?
Yeah. So my printer is it's a single extruder. So I only have one. I only have one head. So if I want to change colors, I'll have to stop the print, pull everything out, feed in another color to do it. There are other printers that have two heads, so you have two pieces of plastic in, and it'll feed one. Then you can tell it at a certain point to stop feeding this one and start feeding this one. Let me go run to the closet here real quick. There's also another filament that you can get. Of course, I cleaned my closet and I know there it is. Hopefully I don't blow you guys' ears out while I'm doing this. There's another filament here that's called a rainbow filament. So as this filament comes off, it actually changes colors as you go so far, because now you can see some pink in there. So you can get a rainbow filament. You don't get to control what color prints when, but you get some really cool prints out of that.
So one thing I was going to mention is some of the models look different. The cases are different, but they should all work basically the same. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So my printer is an Ender 3. I bought that, God, probably about 3 years ago. Well, maybe not 3 years ago, but a few years ago. Since then, they came out with an Ender 5. They now have an Ender 3 Pro, an Ender 5 Pro. That's just one make. Then you have, Ultimaker makes theirs. But regardless of which, the printers work pretty much the same. At least this type of printer takes filament. There's another type of printer that uses like a vat of liquid and it shoots a laser in to print. Jewelers actually use that sometimes when they're designing jewelry, so they can print it so you can kind of like see a ring. They're pretty fast, but they're not as strong. But these are, this stuff works pretty much the same, whether it's an Ender or somebody else's printer. They work the same. You take your model and you put it through what's called a slicer, which prepares it for printing. And then it writes out all the code to send to the printer. So without going into too much details, pretty much all these printers read the same code. So once I slice it for one printer, technically I can throw it off on another printer as long as I'm using the same materials.
Oh, okay. And we've had a couple questions. One from G-Webs, which I don't understand, but I don't know if it's just there's something 3D printed or later related I don't understand. Have you made an all printed as just a replica? Is it possible? Is that?
I'm guessing he's saying, have I printed a replica gun?
Oh.
You can. There's models out there to do that. I've seen models where you could 3D print almost like a blue gun. Blue guns are molds or practice guns where you're showing like martial arts, how to take a knife from somebody or how to take a gun. I've seen models like that. I haven't printed anything quite like that because I haven't had a need to.
Yeah, I've seen there's a channel that the guy does 3D printing like lowers. I don't recall the name of his channel, but he did the last video I saw. He did a scorpion lower.
Yeah, so there's lots of lowers out there. You can 3D print an AK. It's called the Plastikov. And even though you print like the Scorpion lower, there is a Scorpion lower out there. The Plastikov, there's Glocks. There's Smith & Wessons out there now. There's also, what's the one I just saw the other night? Oh, there's a Ruger frame out there now that you can print. And then what you do is you buy the rails, the actual metal rails, and then you put the metal rails into those guns so that way you can take your slide or your bolt carrier. If you're talking about an AR does not, a 3D printed AR lower does not need metal put into it. It's just the, you just print it out and you put your lower parts kit in and then go shoot it. Now, the whole thing about 3D printed guns is that, they are plastic and they're not as strong as like an impact molded or, like a polymer frame. So eventually these things do wear out, but there are some people that printed out like the Plastikov that they're running about 1,000 rounds out of that lower so far. And that's the thing about, if you can print it, you print a few of them. When one breaks, you just transfer your parts over. These things, a roll of filament is about $25, and I think you can get something like 5, maybe 6 Glock 19 lowers out of a roll of filament.
Wow.
So that's
G20.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just
G23.
That's where that's just where we're kind of getting into our consumer mentality, where when it breaks, you throw it away.
G23 was asking if they have printers that do aluminum. They do have ones. There are metal printers, aren't there?
There are metal printers out there. They are really bleeding edge and way outside the home builder's budget. You're talking about $10,000 to $15,000 for that printer. That little printer I show you down there, I think I bought that for about $300. I think you can now buy it for about $200.
Yeah, the Enders. That's one of the ones that I hear a lot of people talk about getting. And forgive the car noise. You can probably hear.
When I was doing my research on a printer, everybody kept on coming up with Ender. Ender seemed to be the one to do it. It's a good balance between quality and price. Is it the best 3D printer out there? No. Is it more than I could ever do with it? Yeah. The quality is way exceeds what I can do with that printer. I know people that are using Enders for production. They actually have a 3D printing business, and they use Ender 3s and Ender 5s all the time just for doing parts for people.
And so what was, you had mentioned how long doing a frame basically was?
Yeah. Glock 17 frame, I think, was about 26 hours. So it's over 24.
So at least a day.
Yeah, you're looking at a day. And the thing about a 3D printer is you really don't want to leave a 3D printer alone by itself. You want to make sure that you check in on it. It doesn't happen often, especially now there's a lot of safeties in them. But in the old printers, pre-Ender 3, well, even in some of the Ender 3s, they didn't have the early Ender 3s didn't have the logic in them, where if the temperature ran away on it, it would catch on. They would catch on fire. Now a lot of these printers have safeties in it, where if the temperature runs away on it, it'll actually shut the printer
down. So is there a difference time-wise if you move up to, like the more professional models? Can they print faster, or is it pretty much they're going to take as long?
They're going to take as long. So the problem you have is in the plastic that you're printing. You can speed them up, but you start losing quality at that time. So your print quality starts going down the faster you go. You can only go so far, and then anything past that, you start to degrade the quality. There are things you can do to speed prints up. Let's just say, I'm going to show you this. So I 3D printed this, and I was talking to you offline about what I use this thing for. But basically, this is just a over-the-door hook. And you can see here, it's pretty weak. I didn't need this to be strong. So this is not printed solid. So if I were to cut this apart, you'll actually see that it's kind of hollow inside. So I can speed up by not printing at 100%. When I printed this is pretty heavy. This is 100% because it's going to be taking impacts. So you can speed things along by printing what they call infill, where it'll do a pattern inside, and it's just air. Just airspace in there. That'll help you speed things up. But if you're looking for strength, you're printing at 100%, and you are just along for the ride. The difference is the material you're printing. This is printed with PLA, which is what everybody starts with. It's super easy to print with. It is actually pretty brittle as a plastic. And if I take this out and put it into the sun for a while and just kind of clamp it like this, in a hot summer day, this will actually start to warp. I'm starting to print with, like, this is printed with PET G, and it's a different type of plastic. Brittle, it's a little more flexible, but it has its own problems as well. You typically have to slow down a little bit on this. You print this at a higher temperature and you slow it down a little bit, because what will happen is it'll start getting you'll get these little strings. It's a very stringy filament. So you have to plan your print out for the material that you're printing. So I print basically I switched over to PET G for everything, mostly because there's some really cool colors that you can print with. PET G, you can also print food grade quality with it. So if you want to print a mug, you can print a mug and drink out of it if you needed to. But I just changed filaments just because there's properties of this. So I print slower, just to keep the quality up. If I don't care, like these things, I didn't care. I just maxed it out. You can't see on the camera very well, but there's some strings right here off of it, and I just didn't care. So slower, better quality, but takes longer.
Gun Websites had a couple more questions. One, can you fill that empty space with like a resin afterwards to stiffen it up?
No, because your surface is you have what's called a skin that gets printed over the top, so you can't get access to those cavities. Now you could reslice it and change the model around where you don't have that top skin. That you could do something like that. That is a possibility. But
and then
you're starting to talk about a little more advanced printing at that point.
He's wondering how many plastics can your $300 machine print with?
I personally have printed with PLA, ABS, and PET G. It can also print nylon. I haven't printed with it, and it can also print nylon with carbon fiber strands in it as well. So nylon is pretty strong, and then you add that carbon fiber into it. It's pretty strong. It'll hold together. I have a product that I was testing out for somebody that was 3D printed. That I didn't know it was 3D printed. I thought it was injection molded, just like everything else. When I got it, I looked at it and was like, "Yeah, this is 3D printed." And he's like, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, tell me about it." And it was nylon infused with carbon fiber. And I took that part and just bent it, and it would not break. I mean, it held together. Did a little bit of creaking, but but yeah, you can print several different filaments. The problem you have with some of these exotics is that you have to go really high in temperature, and like this Ender 3 will max out at 250 degrees, and it'll shut down.
So G23's, oh, sorry.
Right.
Oh,
no.
Is wondering if you've heard of Glowforge printers. I'm not familiar.
I have. I just don't know much about them. I've seen people talk about them in forums, and then one of the places you can go to download 3D models is a website called Thingiverse, and people say, "I printed they came up with a model," and they'll have your settings in there, and it'll say what printer, and I've seen Glowforge in there a few times.
And Gun Website's wondering, can you go back later and add to a printed part, or do you have to always start from scratch?
So yes and no. You can, because what's happening is you're remelting on top of what's already there. Because when you're printing, it's printing these layers, and you're actually fusing them together because you have a semi um, molten layer going on top of a molten layer going on top of a semi molten layer, fusing together, and that's how you get the strength. My printer and most printers now have a feature on it where if right in the middle of your print you lose power, when you get power back, it will resume that print. So that print has already cooled. It'll resume that print again, and it'll start printing on top of it. You'll get a weak joint if you do print on top of colder plastic or plastic that is cooled already. It's going to be, you could have a weakness in your print. So depending on how strong you need that print, it's probably best to start over. I mean, if you're just doing something for modeling, going, okay, does this just work? It probably is not a big deal. But if you're going to do something that you're actually going to have as a finished product, I would start over.
With the 3D printed like interlocking parts, like gears and stuff that goes through other stuff, is that done? Like, can that be done in one straight shot, or does it have to be done?
Some models out there that, yes, they have designed the print that the whole gear system works. It's printed all together. I have yet to do that, but it is possible.
So you were showing me when we were talking before the chat about software and stuff. Then you had something you were going to show. You can talk about that.
Let me. I'll share up my screen here. So anybody who's a gamer might know what this is. Let me go full screen here. So this is a cog from Gears of War. And I just downloaded this off Thingiverse this morning. So this is where you bring your model into to prepare it for printing. Now, you can print it this way. I wouldn't print this model this way, and I'll show you why. Is if I move up, you'll see this red area here on this model. This is telling me that it's unsupported, which means I'm printing over top of thin air. So in order to do that, I need to do some other things to it. What would be best to do, let's see if I can go the other way. What would be best to do is print it this way. Now, I do have some unsupported on the bottom because there's this, but then I also have less supports I need to print. So I would get a better print this way. Now, and I'll show you this little model. I mean, it's not that big. It's probably going to be about this big when it's printed. If I slice it, it takes a while. This takes some computer processing power to render these models. It's going to take 4 hours and 5 minutes to print this model.
So now, something that's about the size of a $50-ish?
Yeah, probably. It might be more like $1. Might be more like a silver dollar. This thing is going to be, let's see here. This is not even, that's not even printing it solid. You can see up here, I said I have 80%. This is my infill. So I'm saying only print 80%, do some work inside so it's not a solid model. And I can show you, if I do preview. So you'll see this light blue area here. This is the extra material that needs to be printed just to print this model upright. That's where I say you can't print over thin air. So it actually prints a layer of plastic up that I'll remove later. So that way it gives it time to print on, or give it an area to print on. See if I can show. I don't know how well it's showing up in there, but like in here, you can actually see this is kind of hollow in here as I move down. You'll see so this is where you're trying to speed a print up.
So that the blue supports that it has to print.
Yep.
Does that print that in a different way so it's easier to remove, or is it all printed the same?
No, it does. I have this thing set up. It took me a while to set this up. They're pretty thin and they break off pretty easily. Now, the problem you have with anything that you have a support on, you're going to have a little bit of roughness. So you try to minimize where you're touching. And you'll see here, there's some area where it's not actually touching. It gives it just enough area for that printer to get in there. And then that way it'll break off. That area will be a little rougher than anything else. But you can also sand these things down as well. Especially if you're going to paint them, you can sand them down. But yeah, so this is all the stuff that you need to do just to prepare this thing for printing. So you can see there's a lot of blue area that it's printing. So if I do, let's go back to, let's flip this around again. So if I slice it that way, the fan of my computer is just going nuts right now because I'm slicing this. But I'm interested to see if, because of all those support, I don't have to print so much supports, it may actually speed the print up. $3 hours and 7 minutes just by rotating this print around. Still the same print. But when I look at my preview, you can see there's not a lot of support. There's not a lot of support it's got to print.
So with this program, can you create from scratch, or is this just for importing a program?
This is just for slicing. And Ultimaker gives this away for free. This is Cura. Ultimaker makes 3D printers, but you don't need to use this just for their printers. They give the software away for free, hoping that one day you'll buy their printer. But that's from here. That's where I would save the disk, and then I would import that into the printer to printing. But this is the preparation part of your 3D printing, is that right there. So if you want to do a design, you're going to need something like a CAD, like an AutoCAD, to make your design.
So when you design something from scratch, how long does it take you? I know it will vary by project, but like if you were gonna
it would depend on how good at CAD you are. I'm not very good at CAD, so it takes me a long time.
And are the programs easy to learn for a beginner, or is it when you're I haven't dealt with CAD at all, so I have no experience with it.
CAD, yeah, dealing with CAD is tough. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a CAD person. I've only started playing with CAD probably in the last 6 months, and it took me forever. I had to do a model. Everybody was printing a model a certain direction where you saw those supports. So if I was going to print, let's just say a Glock. So you have your handle, and then you have the dust cover. And there's a reason why I'm doing this like this, where I'm not holding something up, so that way YouTube doesn't jam it up. Well, everybody prints it upright, and that's the way the model was designed, because there's a couple of things in a Glock that stick up. It keeps you from printing it flat like this. So everybody prints it up, and then you have all these supports. And then this whole underside of the model is very rough. Well, I didn't like that, so I flipped it upside down, and then I put these little cubes all along, basically where the slide would sit on that, just to raise it up so it could print that way. I think I have about an hour and a half into just putting these little cubes, because I'm not good with CAD. So it took me a little while to come up, and these cubes I had to put in are like 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters by 4 millimeters. I mean, these are really small little cubes, and it took me forever to try to figure out how to do it.
I don't know if I could do that.
It tried my patience. Trust me, very much tried my patience.
Because I'll be very detailed and try to be very exact until I feel like it's taking too long. Mm-hmm. And then just start smashing stuff.
Yeah, trust me. I walked away from it a couple of times. Yeah, it was infuriating. Now, if I was a CAD person, it probably would have just flew right through it. If I would have said I want these little 4 millimeter cubes everywhere, somebody who's good with CAD probably just would have been like, just knocked it out in like no time flat. But yeah, no, I get it. I'm the same way.
I think we covered the printer pretty well. How it works and how to use it. And one of the reasons, I started thinking about it was the redefinition of a receiver.
Firearm receiver. Yep.
Yeah. And if there's a link in the description, if you haven't left a comment yet for the ATF, go leave a comment. It doesn't have to be a soliloquy. Just if you oppose it, just say you oppose it. Just let your voice be heard, so you can be counted as someone who opposes it.
And that's the scary thing about that ruling is people are out in the press saying this is gonna ban, and I hate the word, ghost guns. This is gonna ban 3D printed guns. It's not. It's so poorly written that the damage to the industry is more widespread. Even Sig Sauer sent a letter out to their dealers saying that they're against this. Because what's going to happen is that the definition is so bad that I think on the P320, there are something like 6 parts that you're going to need a 4473 for.
Wow.
So on a P320, you just have that chassis, and that metal part of the chassis is the receiver. Well, SIG looked at that definition, and now 6 parts of a P320 you would need a 4473 for. It's bad. It's really bad because it's so widely open. Like, Glock likes to put serial numbers on their barrels and their slides and the frame. There's 3 4473s that would be needed for a Glock pin. So let's just say you're going to replace the slide and the barrel, since G23 is out there, let's just say that G23 hates 40 caliber all of a sudden, and decides to switch his gun over to 9mm, he would just, basically just change out the slide in the barrel. That would mean there's 2 parts that need to be on a 4473 for him to do that with.
Yeah, it's
bad.
Ridiculous.
I mean, it's even down to the point where let's just say you're restoring an old revolver, and the cylinder's bad. You would need a 4473 to buy a new cylinder for that revolver. I mean, it's ridiculous.
So if you haven't left a comment, go leave a comment. You have until, when is it close?
19th.
Till
Thursday.
the 19th. So get it in by the 18th.
Yep.
And right now I think it's the bump stock, not bump. I always say bump stock.
The pistol brace.
Pistol brace. I can't remember. Gun Websites has been tracking this, but kind of the Bloomberg groups, the Moms Demand Action and Every Town and all, they're dumping form letters. So they've, like 20,000. So they'll do like 10,000, 20,000 a day. I think just so that when it closes, those are what you see if you go back and start looking at them. So, you've got a pile this big, but the top is all supporting this. If you don't look past that top part, it looks like everybody's supporting this, because they waited until the end to dump all these support letters.
Of course, they don't want to tip their hand too early on that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not happy about the pistol brace ban. That ruling for that. I'm more worried about this other one, and that's one of the things I'm worried about, is that people are so focused on that pistol brace, they have this other thing. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
I do, I've said the receiver one is the more important one. So if you only comment on one, that's the one that you should. But I think any time the ATF asks for comments, everyone in the gun community should comment, no matter what it is. If they're asking, should they have a ham sandwich for lunch? Every gun owner should comment on their ham sandwich, just so they remember we're out there and we're watching.
Well, look at it this way. Even if you don't want to look at it as supporting your gun rights, you paid for them to read those comments. Make them work for it. Make them work for your tax money.
Exactly. And with the ghost guns, I really think that they're including the traditional definition of a ghost gun was a gun that had the serial number filed off. And then they started in the last couple of years bunching in the 80%ers and calling those ghost guns. So when you hear all these numbers of ghost guns found at crime scenes or whatever, I really think that most of those are guns that had the serial number filed off. But they're muddling what the definition of it is, because they're trying to stop the 80%ers.
Yeah, and I did a podcast where I talked about like the 10 gun myths that drive me nuts, and one of them was statistics. Statistics drive me nuts because you never get access to the raw data. So and statistics can be skewed either way. It's so funny because it's supposed to be that statistics are statistics and they should tell the truth, but they do exactly what you said. They'll say they'll redefine something as a ghost gun, and now all of a sudden those numbers just skyrocket. And now they go, okay, now we need to ban this because they'll create that fear because they redefine something.
Yeah.
So I always say be careful of statistics unless you have the raw data. And I'm one that, I'll even say, there was 5 million new gun owners last year. There was probably not 5 million. There may be 6, there might be 4. I don't know because I haven't looked at the data, but I just, even I fall victim of my own thing that I'll use a statistic that I haven't seen the raw data for. It's easy to do.
Yeah. Mad Sexy was asking, what about guns that are old enough that the numbers are worn off? Does that happen?
And it's, I will never say it never happens, because the second I do, someone will prove me wrong. I can tell you that 10 years as an FFL, I've seen serial numbers that have been pretty close to worn off, but yet I could still log them into my logbook, and these were some pretty old guns. There could be, and one thing to watch out for is I forget the year that they put serial numbers in. Before a certain year, there was guns that didn't even have a serial number on, and some of those they may have not marked them deep enough where they could have worn off. So it's a possibility.
So what do you do with a gun that's old enough that doesn't have a serial number? Do you just log a description?
You log it in, and there's a provision in with logging in for a gun that's old enough that doesn't have one, where it's like you're like no serial, no SN.
Oh, okay. And
is what you put in there.
If I was going to ask a question that was stupid, so we'll skip that. Just trying to because we're coming up on an hour, and so I don't want to get too deep into another subject, because I like to keep these at right about an hour, just so they're easily digested in replay. So you got anything coming up or anything to plug?
Well, I just launched a video yesterday on the Sylvan Arms folding stock. Monday will be episode 4 of my podcast, which I'm going to apologize to everybody now. I was telling you offline. That was the podcast that, if anything technically could go wrong, it did. It went from bad internet to failed computer. So I ended up having to do that interview. It was with Jordan from JSD Supply, off of my cell phone, and my audio is really bad. I've tried the best I could to clean it up, but it's a good interview. Jordan and I talk a lot about stuff, and we talk about this whole, definition of a firearm, because it affects his business really bad. He's the patent owner to the 80% P320 lower. So, that could hurt him really bad. So he's got a vested interest in it. I haven't decided what my video next Friday is going to be yet. One of the problems we have is that we're under stage 2 fire restrictions out here in Montana, and we can't get out to the range. So I've got some footage I'm stitching together, and I just don't know what it's going to be quite yet. But stay tuned, because something, I think it's going to be my first gun versus gun video.
Is that head-to-head comparison or head-to-head competition?
Head-to-head, which one I would choose?
G20.
Both guns I own.
G23 asked a little bit earlier, what about the new agency that will make you get a license to be able to 3D print? I'm not aware of that.
I'm not aware of that either. I mean, if you look at going back through Congress, there are a certain party that was, trying to push this whole home-built firearm thing to be illegal. and the wording that they were using back then was so bad. It was like anything that could be used to make a home built firearm. So everybody's like, okay, cool. So you're going to need an FFL in order to have a machine shop now, because you could make a gun out of a mill.
Yeah.
So it got really, it got kind of crazy. And I think they kind of backed off a little bit. So G-Web's out there. U.S. Department of Commerce's Bureau of Industry and Security.
Yeah, I'm not up to date on any of this.
That's a new one, but leave it to G-Web to pull something out like that. He knows that stuff really well.
So,
but
just like to thank everybody for tuning in on this Saturday morning. Mad Sexy, New York Outcast, G-Webs, as always. He's let me do this. For 2A. All right, I'm not going to be able to talk and type. Stickers, patches, and others. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get this right. Check out gearwebsites.com. That comes up as a link. And he's doing Red Dawn patches. He probably still has some. So go check out his site. See what he's going on. I think I messed up that link, but just copy that, put it in a browser. It'll find that. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. MKJO, Mad Sexy, G23. Might be a little late. I'll probably take a nap. A little late for your show. Guns and Barbecue was here earlier. Don't know if he's still out there. Night Shaft was here way early, probably a week early. Just dropped by to say hello. And any last words there, Mr. Rogue Banshee?
Right now, the biggest thing is make sure you make comments on those proposed rules. Both of them are bad. I think one's worse than the other, but comment on both of them. Tell the ATF to back off. Tell them, make sure you put wording in there you do not support. But when you leave your comment, keep it civil. The second you start going nuts with language or just kind of going off half-cocked, they're going to just throw the comment away. So write it out in a word processor, do your spell checking, read it a couple of times, and then copy and paste it in and submit it in. But make sure you tell them that you need them to back off.
And if you just can't think of anything to say, check out, I think the GOA has a form letter.
GOA has one. The biggest thing about form letters, and this is what might jam up, all the anti-gunners that are filling these form letters out. If the wording is the same, they're going to count it as one. So if you do get a form letter from either GOA, I think Jordan JSD Supply has one out there. I put an Instagram post out. A bunch of us put an Instagram post out earlier this week about it. Make sure you don't copy word for word, because they'll send that through the algorithms and they're going to say, hey, we got 20 of these with the exact same wording. It's going to count as one. So make sure that you're changing your wording around a little bit. Don't copy somebody else's word for word.
So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I appreciate it. And thank you, Rogue Banshee, Jason,
Yeah, man,
Really
thanks
appreciate
for
you taking time.
no problem. Thanks for having me. Yeah, everybody. The reason why this is at a weird time is just because I have a weird schedule, and even then, work tried to interfere with this, and I had it on my calendar, so they couldn't. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for adjusting your time for me.
Oh, no
It's really great
problem.
to be on.
It was well worth it. I think we learned a lot about the printers. So everyone, have a great day.
You still here? It's over. Go home.